Bueno, estamos esperando a la profesora Zenaida y a la profesora Diana, la líder de la maestría. Alejandra Galvis, ¿me puedes decir quién eres? Tienes el micrófono deshabilitado o puedes escribir por chat. Sí, puedes hablar. Hola David, estoy leyendo tu mensaje. Yo estoy aquí. Ok, pero ¿tú eres Diana o Zenaida? Ah, ok, es que tienes otro perfil. Vale, solo falta la profe Diana. Permíteme mandarle un mensaje. Ah, ok. La profesora Diana ya llegó. Bueno, muchísimas gracias, profesor Edwin, profesora Zenaida, profesora Diana, por venir a esta presentación de resultados. De verdad es algo que aprecio mucho. Y nada, vamos a dar inicio en este momento. I'm gonna switch to English now. Mm. So, as I mentioned, this is my presentation for my thesis findings, which is titled Exploring the Relationship Between Multilingualism and the Sociopragmatic Competence. This is a correlational analysis and is made by me, David Santiago. This is the agenda. Um, what is the sociopragmatic competence? This is the first time that we're going to address. Then we're going to talk about what is the problem. Then we're going to see the literature review, the hypothesis and variables, research design, research objectives, the findings, and the significance of the results. Lastly, we're going to have some feedback from you. This is a group of academics, which is made considerate for me to improve this work that I'm presenting you. All right. So what is the sociopragmatic competence? I have this exercise that I want to bring to you, and it's that we need to do an imaginary exercise. So let's try to go back to our school years and imagine your friend whom you have a very close relationship. It is your very good friend and you forgot your pencil. And then you say to him this: I'm really sorry to bother you, but I had to leave my apartment rather quickly this morning. And I forgot to bring my book bag that has all of my pens and pencils in it. So I don't have anything to write with. Would it be possible to borrow a pen or pencil from you? I mean, if you have an extra one, I'll take good care of it, and I'll give it right back after my class. I promise. And I remember to bring my book back next time. So try to imagine what would be the response of your friend, the friend that you have a very close relationship. Well, if you think, he will be kind of weirded out. He will think, what's going on with this guy? Why are you talking to me? It is a very unusual statement to make if you have a close relationship with your friend. However, now picture this. You have a very important seminar to do, and next to you sits the dean. You've never talked to the dean, and you forgot your pencil. Now, if you mention this that we just talked about, I'm really sorry to bother you, then all of a sudden it becomes more suitable. Actually, it seems like you will be a sociopragmatic genius. So that's the difference and the importance of the context. That's the deep root of the sociopragmatic competence. Therefore, the sociopragmatic competence refers to how well you read the societal context and how appropriate can you make your desired speech. It also sets a limitator in the case that you use it inappropriately or a facilitator to establish relationships. This determines whether you're gonna have a good and meaningful relationship or not. So it is very important. But what is the problem in terms of research? What is the problem in terms of research? The current paradigm of acquisition, let me bring out the laser. Right. The current paradigm of the acquisition of the sociopragmatic competence establishes that it can only be studied through direct input. This means that a teacher must know what the sociopragmatic competence is in order to teach it. And this is a big problem because there's a huge sector of teachers that don't know what the sociopragmatic competence is. This leads us to conclude also that there are two possibilities. We have teachers that do not know the sociopragmatic competence and don't apply it in their practice. And we also have that there's a sector of teachers that do not know, yet they apply it. They include the sociopragmatic competence in their teaching practice. What is the problem with DI, the direct input? Well, the current paradigm shows that the sociopragmatic competence can only be learned by explicitly studying the sociopragmatic competence. So if you're a teacher that wants to teach the sociopragmatic competence, you had to learn that in your university years, in your master years. Otherwise, it's very unlikely that you'll teach it. However, there is a sector of teachers that don't know what the sociopragmatic competence is, and they are able to teach it. So this is the problem. Who is this group that don't know what the sociopragmatic competence and yet they are able to teach it? What are they like, and what can we learn from them? Uh, Now let me talk a little bit about the state of the art. This is the current knowledge that we have on the acquisition of the sociopragmatic competence. The first one, also, by the way, I made this in terms of three short statements, but in my thesis, this is much longer. So the first one that we have is that the knowledge of the sociopragmatic competence is extremely poor. Um, Either by teachers or by learners. There is no evidence that the sociopragmatic competence can be acquired. Remember that it can only be studied. And finally, there is a lack of sociopragmatic competence in a foreign language environment raised by the lack of knowledge concerning pragmatics. So English teachers or language teachers in general don't know what um, sociopragmatics is or pragmatics. So I made this hypothesis. I made the null hypothesis. There is not a hypothesis um, formulated arithmetically, but I made it. And is that the current state of the art tells us that the sociopragmatic competence cannot be acquired, only studied. And this can be represented as sociopragmatic competence plus X is equals to the direct input plus X. Now let's replace that X with a given value, for example, 1. If you replace direct input by 1, then you're going to also have sociopragmatic competence increase by 1. This means that the equation is equal in magnitude. The more direct input that you have, the more sociopragmatic competence you will have. But this is completely it doesn't have a very solid basis. So this is why I want to present an alternative hypothesis, and is that in fact we can acquire the sociopragmatic competence through multilingualism, and I can prove that with a linear regression. This is R2 sub sociopragmatic competence times the number of languages someone speaks. This should give us a value equal or greater than 0.5. This is the linear regression. Now let me explain you why that 0.5. So in statistics, this is the threshold to say that the link between two variables is significant enough when it acquires values that are equal or greater than 5. So in my hypothesis, I have two variables, and is that we can increase our sociopragmatic knowledge through the sociopragmatic competence if we increase the languages that we know. For example, if I speak English and Spanish, I can increase my sociopragmatic competence by learning another language, for example, French. And that is my alternative hypothesis. This statistic approach gives us values from -1 to 1. -1 produces negative correlation effects. For example, the more languages I learn, the less sociopragmatic competence I have. Or it gives us positive values. For example, the more languages I learn, the more sociopragmatic competence I can make evidence. So this is my research design. Um, the methodology is a correlational design. I used a simple random sampling technique. The technique was an online survey which combines one LCP. This is a language contact profile. I'm going to talk more a little bit about that. And one ICI, the intercultural sensitivity um, inventory. This sample belonged to two websites. One is Interpulse, which is a website commonly used to improve your languages with native speakers. And in this website, you will find many multilingual people, as well as monolingual, bilingual. The good thing from this website is that it is it shows many things from many groups, and also ResearchGate. So I use those two. And finally, I use a piloting with 8 people from the UNAD University, from the Semillero Civit. I forgot the word in English. I'm sorry. Um, research group. Yeah. What is the LCP? The LCP is a well-established tool for identifying the linguistic background. It offers a predictive validity with a Cronbach alpha reliability of 0.827, and it basically shows the qualitative data behind your profile linguistic background. It shows us how many languages do you speak, how well do you speak those languages, whether you speak, for example, I speak French poorly, I speak German very good, I speak Italian fairly good. It also shows us your experience abroad and your interactive contact profile. This last one, your interactive contact profile, shows us the last time you had contact with that other language that you know, for how much time, do you use it at home, or have you grown up with that language? So those are very important things to consider. It is not just about the number of languages, it is about the interactive contact profile. Then we have the ICE. This one is more related to the sociopragmatic competence. While this one, the LCP, is linguistic, this one is more about the sociopragmatic competence. The ICE measures the sensitivity and your ability to be aware of social behaviors. This inventory has a reliability coefficient that measures about 80. So it is a very reliable tool. The ICE was triangulated as well with the Leach model of sociopragmatics in the form of an evaluation grid that scores from 0 to 50. And this is the Leach model. The Leach model divides the sociopragmatic competence into 10 categories: awareness to interpretation, to age, to region, to socioeconomic, ethnocultural, gender, profession, hierarchical, awareness of the language change over time, and interest in language context. This model was originally developed by Leach in 1986, and it suffered two revisions, one in 2003 and the other one in 2013, roughly 10 years apart. So what are my research objectives? The first one is to demonstrate whether there is a correlation between multilingualism and the sociopragmatic competence. The second one is to compare how well the various language groups perform in terms of the sociopragmatic competence based on the number of languages they report speaking. This means I want to see whether a bilingual possesses a higher sociopragmatic knowledge than a monolingual. And finally, I also wanted to determine which factors best promote the acquisition of the sociopragmatic competence by identifying the interactive language contact profile of the sample that score highest in the sociopragmatic competence scale. This means that we're no longer talking about the number of languages, but what if you were a monolingual and you score really high in the sociopragmatic competence? What can I do to have that score that you had being monolingual? This adds more complexity to my hypothesis. And let's start talking about the findings. So first, I made a distribution of groups, which divided my sample within those that speak one language, two languages, three languages, four languages, and more than four languages. This is very important, and we can see that we have a normal distribution. This is also called a Bell distribution, which tells us that the majority of the sample is going to focus around the middle of the range. And this is the case for those who speak two languages and three languages. Then it becomes kind of more rare those who speak one language and those who speak more than four languages. With that information, now it is possible to assign averages of the sociopragmatic competence. For example, here I I gave the average score to each group. For example, one language scored 22.64, which has a scale interpretation of low sociopragmatic competence. Those who speak two languages scored 22.37, which is also low. But notice this, and I wasn't expecting this result, and is that those that speak one languages exhibit higher sociopragmatic competence than those that reported speaking two languages. And I'm gonna talk also about why is that. Those that speak three languages reported a sociopragmatic score of 37.50, which is intermediate. Four languages reported 35.60, which is also intermediate. And those that spoke more than four languages obtained a score of 39.60, which is high. And I associated this 3.9 to 60. I gave it a 4 because it's closer due to the decimal of the 60s beyond 50. So that's why it gets a high. Now with that information, I can do a performance reading. So what does it mean to have a low, intermediate, and high sociopragmatic competence? So if you obtain a low score, that means that you frequently misinterpret messages, you fail to pick up on simple social clues, and you have a poor concern for reading social context. If you score an intermediate score, you demonstrate a reasonable amount of understanding for interpretation of messages of various viewpoints, although this comprehension is frequently restricted to the most fundamental forms that do not go beyond his interactive framework. Let's imagine if you're a teenager, you might do really well in sociopragmatic terms, talking with your peers, with other teenagers. But then when you talk with an adult, your sociopragmatic competence is not as good as you talk beyond your comfort zone. And the last one is if you reported a high score. So if you report a high score, you will exhibit high concern for the significance of context, and you will be aware of numerous strategies that speakers employ to employ meaning in various social circumstances. We can now trace a trend line. Given that we have the scores of the sociopragmatic scores and the number of languages those teachers reported speaking. So here we find that there is in fact an anomalia, excuse me, and but the tendency is to rise. So we're definitely pre, pre preparing ourselves for a positive correlation, because look at the direction of this trend line. Now let's talk about this problematic section, which in all honestly, it was the one that required the most amount of analysis. I didn't know how to proceed. And I came up with a procedure which is called a standard deviation measurement, which analyzes the 10 categories within the group that spoke one language. If this was homogeneous, this should look like a circle. But we can see that most of the monolinguals rated very high in awareness to interpretation. After a closer inspection, I realized that those monolinguals were English native speakers who taught English. So this led me to conclude that if you're a native speaker, you're gonna show to your students more awareness to interpretation. The messages that you convey, that you teach, you're gonna very often say that they have multiple interpretations. However, they score relatively low in the other areas of the Leach model. This is the correlation, and it's the most important um, visual measurement of my thesis. So we can see, in fact, that there is a positive correlation, and I was able to get the correlation score and the equation. So the correlation score scored 0.9187, which is a very, very high correlation. And I wasn't expecting this. In my threshold, I talked about that I will probably get a correlation of about 0.50, but 0.90, we're talking about this is very important. There is definitely a correlation that shows that the more languages you speak, the more sociopragmatic knowledge you're going to exhibit. Let's take also a look at the outliers of this graphic. For example, there's people who spoke 2 languages, but look, this one right here scored 50. So there will always be people who spoke very few languages, yet they score very high in the sociopragmatic competence. I want to see what are they doing so that they score very high. But the trend line tells us that the more languages you speak, the more sociopragmatic competence you're gonna exhibit. Now let's analyze the top performing group. So we have these criteria and their results. Uh, this is the group that rated highest in the sociopragmatic competence. We are no longer talking about languages. We are more so talking about the language background. So of this group that rated very high, they reported very high language proficiency, 72.72%, in fact. Experience in education, this was not as important for this high-performing group. They were 54.55%, and they reported having education in languages different from the mother tongue. Experience abroad. Now notice this one. This one is extremely important, and it's showing why this group, this top performing group, is performing so high in the sociopragmatic competence. They all had experience abroad. We are talking about experience practicing that language abroad. So if you had that practice of speaking a language that it is not your mother tongue abroad, that's gonna hugely increase your sociopragmatic competence. Has had multiple contact experiences of exposure in other languages. For example, I worked in these languages, I made this friend, I went on vacations, multiple circumstances. 90.91% of the reports had multiple contact experiences of exposure. This is also another very significant finding. The longest exposure. So how long were you in this other country? This was not as relevant. In fact, it is below 50. They reported 27% of the whole sample had more than 4 years in that international experience. And finally, the last contact with the foreign language. The whole top performing group reported 92% of maintaining current contact with the language they know. So this is as well very important. If you want to keep having high sociopragmatic competence, you need to keep contact with the language that you just learned. Now let's analyze that more graphically. Let's view where are the peaks. Here's one. So it reports having current contact with L2. This is very important for improving your sociopragmatic competence. But then having more exposure, more than 4 years of exposure, it is not as important as maintaining current contact. And finally, there's another peak right here, and it has had language experience abroad. So of this, we can say that having experience abroad, reporting having current contact, and having multiple forms of exposure is going to improve our sociopragmatic competence. Now let's talk about the significance of the results. There is a strong correlation between multilingualism and the sociopragmatic competence, which I show through the findings. This shows that the sociopragmatic competence is an acquirable phenomenon, contrary to the current state of the art, which said, no, it is not acquirable, but I am proven that is in fact acquirable, and is raised by the exposure to the frameworks of the linguistic diversity. The more diverse you get immersed into another language, the more it is going to affect your sociopragmatic competence. This study proves that each new language acquisition results in 10.198 points in the sociopragmatic scale. Now, let me remind you that the scale goes from 1 to 50. So if you learn a new language, you're going to improve 10 points, 198 in the scale of the sociopragmatic competence, which is a lot given that the highest score is 50. So let's say with 3 languages, you're going to have already a very good sociopragmatic knowledge. While the language repertoire is important, the number of languages, the evidence suggests that the sociopragmatic competence can be improved with the contact language framework, with being abroad, having multiple experiences, and maintaining current contact with the language. Now, what about the reliability of these findings? This is we showed a very strong relationship between these two variables, but are they reliable? So I perform an internal consistency test in the form of a standard deviation in all the groups. So all the groups received the standard deviation treatment, and I got these scores. The values go from 0 to 5 because 0 is the lowest, 5 is the highest that you can get in one of the items of the categories of Leach. So by having the standard deviation, I just need to compare it to the reliability coefficient, which is 100%. So let's say 5 is my 100%. So 1 will represent the 6.66%, which is equated to our reliability coefficient. Then for group 2, it was the same. I got a reliability coefficient of 0.78, for 0.3, 0.86, for 0.4, 0.79, and for group 4, 0.94. At the end, I measured the overall average of these 4 groups, and I got a reliability coefficient, overall coefficient of 0.8, 6 in the decimal, which is a very high reliability coefficient. It is um, a very reliable findings that we just talked about. Finally, let me address some controversial topics. The first one, what is a bilingual? This one was raised by my advisor, uh, Professor Edwin, and I find out that the possession of the language is not determined by its ability, but by its use, expressive and social function. So we're talking about the function of the language. And this question, what is a bilingual, can be addressed from two viewpoints. One is the functionalist approach in linguistics that tells us that the acquisition is determined by the purpose of the communicative success. And there's an opposing idea that is made by the generativist, and is that the acquisition is determined by different modules of grammar. This one goes more in consonant with the CFR, the A1, A2, B1, B2. So for this research, I'm sticking to this one, which is the acquisition is determined by the purpose and the communicative success. We can say that uh, in the south of France, uh, this person is bilingual, even though he doesn't speak very good Italian, because he's a farmer. He speaks his French in the south of Italy, in France, but when he goes to the border of Italy, he buys stuff and he uses Italian even though he presents a very low um, grammar modules of grammar in Italian, we can say that this user is in fact a bilingual because it is determined by the function that he's using. Now, these were my references, and now we're gonna use this space for some feedback. So let me know what do you think about this thesis. You can also write if you want. We cannot use the micros. Oh, started recording. I don't. Uh, but is it because of me? I am not given the. Ah, okay, okay, okay. Oh, all right. I think you can use the mics now. I'm really sorry I didn't
Yes,
consider this.
yes. Yes, we can talk now. Thank you. Thank you, David. Okay, David, congratulations. You did a very interesting research. Um, Please remind me, how many people did you interview?
51 in the form of a online survey, but of those 51, I could only manage 45 because there were some people that did not complete the survey.
Okay. And
45
did you
people.
know the people?
No, it was completely random. So I used this website called Interpulse and ResearchGate, and I posted a message in the forums. Hey, I need help from language teachers. Please send me your responses. I need to analyze this. And 51 people contributed to the survey.
Okay, that's great. Excellent, David. And what do you think are the best strategies to improve our students' socio-pragmatic awareness?
So since this approach is acquisitionable, the best thing
Yeah.
that you can do is to learn another language. This thing that learning another language is going to bring more good things, which is being interested in having authentic experiences, such as talking with a native, probably being abroad, and keeping constant contact with the language, new language that you learn. I would say those are the most important.
Okay, David, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Uh, yeah, Professor Senaida, I enabled your microphone now, and also Professor Edwin. So if you wanna say something. All right. Um, well, I appreciate your
Yes.
assistance. Yes,
Okay,
you
I would like
wanted
to say
to.
something more. Uh, okay, Zenaida says I'm not able to use my microphone.
Okay, I allow it again. Uh,
Zenaida,
Hi,
can you now?
David and Diana.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
You can hear me, right?
yes, we can hear
Yes.
you.
All right. Well, so thank you, David and Professor Senaida and Diana for being here. So, well, I have already shared with David my views about this work, which is pretty outstanding. This is one to maybe of the works that I stand out the most. Sorry, because of, well, mainly because of, the originality of the topics, the research method chosen, the way this research was conducted. I considered the findings that David provided us today, and which in fact he continues reporting these findings, uh, definitely contribute to our field. This is definitely something to stand out. That I'm pretty sure that we go over those results, those interpretations, this report in general. We might see the importance of showing this work. This is why, well, the meeting or the work we are having today is meaningful because of the importance of what we're seeing and hearing today. So thanks again, David, for your work, and and that's it.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your words. I'm very honored uh, by those words. Really appreciate it. Uh, Professor Senaida, I allow the microphone. So you just have to click on the microphone and
Press.
enable
Yeah,
it.
press the
Yeah.
microphone, Zenaida.
¿No puedes? Ah, ok. Eh, hagamos un último intento. Voy a desactivarlo y lo vuelvo a activar. También aquí. Ok. En este momento deberías poder. No. All right. I'm extremely sorry. I don't know. Sometimes we have this technological barriers, and I'm really sorry. But I'm really honored because I I really appreciate your assistance. In the past, I've talked to you that I really like your ideas in the courses of um, meta cognitive skills, and that's something that I learn a lot. Ok. Ok, me vas a enviar las observaciones. Bueno, ok, perfecto.
I'm sorry, David. I want to say another thing here. I want to invite you to the research group, to the research group. Now you are in the seatbed. I forgot the name. With tutor Linda.
Linda
Civit,
Regnier.
right?
Sí, sí,
Now
that
we
is
are
right.
working in the proposal of new research lines, and one of them is the one you proposed some time ago. You remember?
Yes, sociopragmatic line. I'm sorry,
Yes.
the sociolinguistic line, which is the one that I
Yeah.
propose. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yes. So we are working on that, and I'm going to invite you to continue working on that line because we are working the document.
All right. Yeah, that is excellent. I'm really happy to be invited. I will be there.
Okay,
Thank you.
excellent, David. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, thank you for your assistance, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.